Welcome to the second video, Underachievement and the Gifted. And this area of gifted education I find absolutely fascinating. So I hope you enjoy this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. And as per usual, defining underachievement, you would think of as being a fairly straightforward task, but unfortunately, just as there is no universal agreed upon definition of gifted and talented learners, there is no universal definition of gifted underachievements that currently exist. Now, Dr. Rimm has identified several factors that may place children at risk for later underachievement. The too soon child may be the child born out of wedlock to young parents who are not equipped for the maturity, the responsibility, or the consistency needed for appropriate parenting these very challenging children. The overwhelmed child is that child that is the result of years of infertility or adoption, who was desperately wanted. And though you can't love a child too much, Dr. Rimm contends that you can give a child excessive attention that can be a risk factor for later underachievement. Rimm also states that there are specific sibling combinations that predispose children towards underachievements. These are those children that are born very close in age, same gender siblings, siblings of an extremely gifted child, many siblings with one who is much younger, or siblings of a child with extreme physical or mental health problems. Also, severe early health problems may lead to a sort of intense relationship by one or both parents with that infant, that preschooler, that could potentially have a negative effect on the child's development or self-sufficiency, which can then affect their achievement. And the types of parenting relationships that Rimm contends could affect achievement are single parents, divorced parents, or death of a parent, or an intact marriage with an oppositional style relationship between the mum and the dad. And all these are early risk factors for underachievement in gifted children. Now, gifted children are susceptible to underachievement if the work that they are set is not challenging. I think we know that by now. And that when the child puts in no effort at all because of this, then as these children grow, the praise, the rewards for doing so well actually diminish. And these gifted children can then sometimes feel that they have fallen off this pedestal that they have been put on. And how that child is able to deal with these factors determines whether the child becomes an extremely motivated achiever who wants to please children and please their teachers and please their parents, or whether they start down the path of underachievement. So why do so many talented students fail to realise their potential? And for years, really, the underachievement of gifted and talented students has troubled both parents and educators. Far too often, children who show really great academic potential just fail to perform at a level that consummates with their ability. Now, this is some of the factors that identify what underachievement looks like. Predominantly low self-confidence or low self-esteem. These characteristics have been listed time and time again in research as the common trait in students dealing with underachievement. These students will use reading time, TV and video games as an escape from doing homework. They may have the inability to persevere. If they don't do it the first time, they're not going to do it at all. They have creative ideas, but they just can't bring it together and make closure on that idea. They can connect the dots, but they just can't finish it off. A lot of them find school boring because they're in the wrong year group. They don't have the right peers to bounce ideas off and to really engage them in their work. A lot of these students are totally disorganised. They sometimes have possible behaviour problems and sometimes have learning problems, and we'll look at those 2E kids later. A lot of them actually believe they have low academic self-perceptions. They don't actually believe they are as clever as they think they are, and this can lead to low motivation, low effort towards academic tasks. They just don't put the effort in, they can't be bothered. A lot of them have negative attitudes towards not only the whole school, but also towards their particular teachers, because they don't get them, they don't understand them, they're not challenging them in the right way. And therefore this leads to a lot of daydreaming and a lot of dawdling, because they're switched off after the first sentence, because they understood it the first time the teacher went through it. They don't have any goals because they've done the hardest work that has been set in a nanosecond. So there's nothing to reach for. And then this can lead to feelings of inferiority because they've done it and they're just sitting there with low motivation to ask for more work to do. Because they don't always want to be shown as being as clever as they are. They don't want to be bullied sometimes, or they don't want any special attention. So they avoid this competition unless they are sure they are going to win. Okay, so let's begin by attempting to define underachievement. What is it? Now, this is no easy task, as this has become a popular subject in the educational literature, and each author has his or her own view of what underachievement means. And I guess this brings us to the difficulty about this topic. It is very subjective. But Rimm in 1995 identified that children with average or above average and even gifted intellectual abilities who are simply not performing up to their capabilities is what the general understanding of underachievement is. So there's a severe discrepancy then between the expected achievement as measured by standardised achievement tests or scores on our cognitive ability assessments and their actual achievement as measured by the class teachers and teacher evaluators. You can't really test for underachievement. There's not a gold standard of what it is. You'll just get a general sense as a parent or achievement that it's there. They're just not reaching their expected level of achievement. And although there are many definitions that are far more technical, a discrepancy between this potential and actual productivity seems to be a part of all of them. Gifted and talented students are not a homogenous group, we know that by now. They are a really diverse group. Their behaviours are different, their interests are different, and obviously their abilities are different. So underachievement looks very different from child to child. And this is why it matters. This particular statistic is all over the place in the literature, so I feel comfortable with its validity. That approximately 50% of the gifted population fit the definition of underachievement. And this came from a study done which was followed approximately 60 to 70 gifted and talented students for 4 years after high school. 100% of them attended college. 83% finished 4 years of college. And this is without underachievement issues. But if we look within the same study of those gifted students who struggled with underachievement, 87% attended college, and out of that only 52% finished 4 years of college. Now this means that however students fared in high school, what grades they got, they seem to be locked into those grades at the college experience. 4 years after high school graduation, high school and college achievements were strongly correlated. 13 years after high school, the education and occupational status of high school underachievers paralleled their grades in high school rather than their actual abilities. So between 18 and 25% of high school dropouts are identified as gifted. Now that is the most terrible statistic of all. Think of all those brilliant minds that are going to waste. This stat is repeated time and time again across many different authors. 18 to 25% of high school dropouts are identified as gifted. So causes of underachievement in gifted students. Determining why some high ability students demonstrate low levels of achievement is difficult because underachievement occurs for many different reasons. The vast majority of cases of underachievements, though, do occur for three basic reasons. An apparent underachievement problem masks more serious physical, cognitive or emotional problems. The underachievement is symptomatic of a mismatch between the student and his or her school environment. And the underachievement results from a personal characteristic such as low motivation, low self-regulation, or low self-efficacy. Each of these causes for underachievement may require a different intervention, and therefore educators should really attempt to isolate the reason for students' behaviour before attempting to reverse the underachievement. The ramifications of mismatching the cause and the treatment of underachievement can actually be quite serious. So there are 6 common areas. The rebel, why should I play the school game? The conformist, don't notice that I'm smart, hide away in the corner. The stressed learner, it's not good enough. The struggling student, I just don't get it. The victim, it's not my fault. And the bored student, there's nothing new to learn. We'll go through each of these in turn. So those that struggle with underachievement are a very diverse population. Consequently, no two authors can describe these types of students in the same way. But there do seem to be 3 personality types that occur more frequently in literature than others. But remember, most students struggling with underachievement do not fit any stereotypes, but rather they're a blend of characteristics from several. The 3 that we will discuss are underachievement gone to the extreme, and most students may not present in such an exaggerated way. So Rebecca locks herself in her room to avoid her scolding parents. She turns to her telephone, her stereo, and journal for outlets for her anger. Her friends, smoking, drinking and/or drugs help her deal with her feelings of inadequacy. Her grades are either A's or F's depending upon whether she likes that particular teacher or not. She sees no need for college and has become pregnant in her junior year. Her life may be filled with marriage, divorce, single parenting and everything that goes along with her. Her underachievement is a symptom of much bigger and more difficult problems. This personality type exhibits itself with extreme rebellion against authority, particularly school authority, and it provides a protection for this student who is dealing with underachievement. By asserting that school is irrelevant and that she needs no reason to study material for which there is not any use, Rebecca is using an avoidance behaviour that may stem from a lack of self-esteem. The lack of self-esteem in turn stems from a pattern that has developed in which if she fails, she blames a lack of ability. If she succeeds, she attributes this to luck. Rebecca then accepts responsibility for the failure, but never for the success. And if she can totally rebel out and blame the school for her low grades, this helps Rebecca avoid the responsibility of achieving by blaming the system. So the stressed out learner or perfectionist Pearl. Pearl's papers are always neat. Her desk is always neat. Her handwriting is always neat. But when assigned with an original story, she can't even come up with a title in 20 minutes. She's paralysed by fear of failure because her title might not be the perfect title. And as long as her assignments are concrete and specific, she performs well. As she advances towards middle school and she has to think abstractly or originate her own ideas, her grades and her confidence begin to decline. She is a parent's dream until adolescence, when she begins A strange rebellion that may consist of anger, depression, eating disorders, anything that she can control. We all know that perfectionism plagues most gifted and talented students at some point, but taken to an extreme, it can lead down the road to underachievement. Perfectionism provides a sort of protection for those struggling with underachievement because it is unachievable and therefore provides the student with ready excuses for poor performance. Students can state that they set their goals higher than most, so of course they can't always succeed. The student then provides a rationale for failure so they don't have to label themselves as incompetent, although they may view themselves privately as such. The complacent learner, or we shall call him passive Paul. Now this child exhibits himself as dependent, daydreaming or lethargic. He may be diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder. He probably never developed self-confidence in his abilities because he didn't have to struggle. He had grandparents, siblings and parents who attended to his every need as a baby and even tried to provide an easy way for him through school that did not include stress. Paul has learned to stop his efforts and prevent uncomfortable feelings at the very least bit of stress. He admits that he feels dumb when he tries not to dwell too much on this and instead watches lots of TV, spends copious amounts of time playing computer games, or loses himself in books of fantasy. He's generally a pleasant, likeable fellow. He just can't get his work done and responds, "I don't know," or "I've forgotten," when called upon in class. His homework is rarely done, books assignments don't seem to make it home for study, and his grades continue downwards towards failure. So those were 3 of the ways underachievement can manifest itself in children. In Sylvia Rimm's book, Why Bright Kids Get Poor Grades and What Can You Do About It, it has many more examples of her work and of children's characteristics. I'd highly recommend this book if you feel that this may be an issue that you are interested in the future. Okay, so we're going to go on to Rimm's law. She defines causes for underachievement in children. There are 12 strategies for dealing with these students who are not motivated to learn. These laws are valuable for the development of all students, but especially important for poorly motivated students who are underachieving academically. So the first one is that children are more likely to be achievers if their parents join together to give the same clear and positive message about school effort and expectations. The second one is about models to imitate. If they have good, appropriate behaviours of models to imitate, they find this easier. Communication about a child between adults within the child's hearing dramatically affects child's behaviours and self-perceptions. Overreaction by parents to the children's success and failures lead them to feel either intense pressure to succeed or despair and discouragement in dealing with this failure. Children feel more tension when they are worrying about their work than when they are actually doing the work. Children develop self-confidence through struggle. Deprivation and excess frequently exhibit the same symptoms. Children develop confidence and an internal sense of control if power is given to them in gradually increasing sentiments as they show maturity and responsibility. Children become oppositional if one adult allies with them against the parent or the teacher, making them more powerful than the adult, and that can have detrimental effects. Adults should avoid confrontations with children unless they are sure that they can control the outcomes. Children will become achievers only if they learn to function in competition. And then lastly, children will continue to achieve if they usually see the relationship between the learning process and its outcome. So those are her 12 laws. We're going to move on to causes of underachievement in gifted students, particularly parents, schools and peers. So possible family causes. So the causes of underachievement are complex, and a pattern that develops in elementary school often continues into the higher grades if it is not reversed in college and on into adulthood. There are a number of contributing factors mentioned in the literature, and we'll just touch upon a few of the agreed upon reasons here. If we didn't have enough to feel guilty about already as parents, we know that there are some issues to do with parenting that can actually affect underachievement. Now, these are all things that we struggle with, and I think when you look at the list, it screams moderation. I think this is what the literature suggests, that as far as parenting techniques go, it's not good to be extreme in either direction of the spectrum. The first bullet is perhaps the most important here. When we are inconsistent, whether that is within ourselves or inconsistent with our partner, we start our kids down a really bad path. It's important to have firm but realistic rules, consequences, and also expectations for our children, and start this at a very young age. For students struggling with underachievement, the highly competitive classroom can also be a massive problem for them. The announcement of grades in the class, the surprise of a teacher when a student scores higher or lower than expected, and the continuous ranking of students does foster extreme competition in classes. Students with underachievement issues tend to be poor losers and may not even become involved in an activity unless they are certain that they will win. Highly competitive classrooms offer too much failure and not enough success. Children need to experience both. So high achieving peers have a positive influence on gifted students who begin to underachieve. The reversal is true as well. One study showed that 66% of high ability students named peer pressure as a primary force against getting good grades. And studies show that friends' grades are very similar by the end of the year. So there are massive peer, cultural and environment issues to do with underachievement. Obviously, these causes, when severe enough, warrant professional help, such as seeking counselling or psychological help, which is what you guys eventually will go into. So it's the depression, the anxiety, externalising issues such as the rebellion and the non-conformity. It could also be learning problems. A massive one is deficit in self-regulation when we talk about children who have ADHD. It could be social immaturity and this dual exceptionality, this 2E children, twice as exceptional. But is there hope? Well, children are not born underachievers. Underachievement is learnt, and therefore it can be unlearnt. So let's look at some interventions, and these are aimed at reversing gifted underachievement, and they fall into two categories. The first one is counselling. Counselling interventions concentrate on changing the person and or the family dynamics that contribute to the student's underachievement. This could be group counselling, family counselling, and in most counselling situations, the counsellor's goal is not to force the underachiever to become more successful, but rather to help the student decide whether success is a desirable goal, and if so, to help reverse this counterproductive habit and obviously mindset. We also have educational instruction, and the most well-known educational intervention for gifted are either part-time or full-time special classrooms. A favourable environment for students' achievements by altering that environment of education in the first place. Maybe it's a small student-teacher ratio, and this just means that there's some more choices, some more freedom, in exercising control over what is going on in their environments. And students can then be encouraged to utilise lots of different learning strategies. So as teachers, since we know we can reverse underachievement, let's have a look at how teachers can help. Again, another note on competition. We know it shouldn't be eliminated entirely, so it can be used productively by having students compete with their own past performances. But teachers also need to use teams and group competitions so that students can share the positive and negatives, in that we're all in this together mentality. Students should experience both wins and losses, and the structure of the classroom should be set up for this to happen. And then open discussions of feelings about winning and losing should also be encouraged. So as parents, children can become what they see, so we must model that appropriate response ourselves, or that social learning theory and Bandura. Not only should we be achievers, but we must share with our children realistic and positive views of achievement. Children should understand that sometimes as parents we do fail and we feel disappointed, but that we do survive this so that we can succeed again. We need to let our children see our discouragement and also our elation, and see the intrinsic and the extrinsic rewards that come from our efforts. Sometimes if the way in which we phrase things and what we're showing our children, we're kind of setting our children up for failure when we use words like smartest and brilliant. Instead, we should really emphasise the hard work involved in getting those good grades. Again, consistency is the key. So what can teachers do? What can schools do that can help eliminate underachievement? They can provide intellectual challenges and advanced studies in a curriculum that is suited to gifted children. They can identify that students can actually work independently on their own. They can make activities and assignments for their particular students and have acceleration programs and enrichment programs and use differentiated grouping. They can have monitoring programs in force as well, and have a lot of extracurricular activities for these students. In regards to peers, parents and teachers should encourage interaction and friendship with other gifted achievers with similar interests. Again, if underachievement is or becomes a challenge, you need to seek out counselling, and a counsellor who is familiar with specifically gifted children. Otherwise, the cycle of underachievement has the potential to affect all aspects of family life in a particularly negative way. And so finally, in the words of wise Dumbledore, it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our own abilities.